Welcome to MSP Unplugged, episode number 3, Essential Security Best Practices. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Let me introduce my co-host. We have Paco Lebron from ProdigyTeks. Paco, how you doing?
Better than good, better than most.
Excellent. And also we have Mike Slodowski from Magnus Box, or that great movie, Monster Inc.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good to have you, man. All right. So let's go ahead and start off the show in a typical fashion. Paco, share a tip or story that we could learn from.
Yes. So I got a tip for those that are or have been thinking about joining PAX 8. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of get your toes wet on what they have to offer. PAX 8 actually has quite a bit of NFR licenses with multiple companies to really try out. Just this weekend, me and a couple of the other guys in the community got together here in Chicago, and we actually kind of perused through some of them. There's one that I'm trying out now called Infrascale. Or I'm sorry, not Infrascale. That's the backup company. Iron Scales. Iron Scales is the one that we were doing, the anti-phishing company. So it seems to be pretty cool so far. Apparently it has a very advanced way of picking up phishing attempts via either Office 365 or on G Suite. So it's so far pretty cool, but that's one that I found from there. I also saw a couple other file syncing tools that had an NFR license to kind of test out and see if it's probably of good worth or value to your customers. So for those that are PAX 8 subscribers and haven't really dug around it in a long time, I would encourage you to go in there, see what NFR licenses that they have. And obviously NFR stands for not for resale. So it's really more for your testing, for you to implement in your business and really understand if it's a great tool and if it's something you want to roll out to your customers and make a little bit more money.
Very excellent tip. All right, Mike, I know I'm putting you on the spot probably because, you just rushed in, but do you have a tip or story that we could learn from today?
So for Magnus Box, I guess my number one tip is always check your backups. You'll hear me preaching that a lot in this episode because just because you have a backup platform, you have to make sure you test those backups, and it can prevent disaster in the future. So even though you got it going, always once, twice a month or quarterly, just go in there, run a test restore, make sure it works, and know how to use your platform. So when bad things do happen, you know how to get your client back up in a reasonable amount of time.
So, Mike, you're telling me that for managed services, obviously via backup or anything that we do, it's not a just set it and forget it?
No, backup should never be a set it and forget it, because when it gets to that phase, I have a few partners on our platform, and I work very closely with our community. And every now and then I'll pop in on servers and I'll see a few that have their clients haven't backed up in a month or two. I think there's one right now, it's up to like 4 months it hasn't backed up. And I keep reaching out to them, but there's only so much I can do on our side. We host the backup platform for our partners, but they're still responsible for taking care of and managing their backups. So, you got to go in there, you got to make sure they're working. If something's not working, get with your backup provider, open a ticket, see what's going on. And like with us, we're always willing to help our partners and give them guidance, whether it be through a ticket or through a remote session or through a phone call.
Excellent. All right. I guess with that, my tip for this week is you are smarter than you think. And what I mean by that, and I've said this before time and time again, I think a lot of people out there, when we think about what we think we know inside the IT community, the ways that we run our business, the things that we do, I think sometimes we think we're not as smart as we actually are. And sometimes you have to look at the things that you're able to do in a lot of cases is nothing short of miraculous. And I mean that seriously, because a lot of people there's been many, many times where somebody's lost their data and they didn't have a backup. And people are able to go in and retrieve that information. Now, that's not always the end of the story, but it happens more often that way than others, where the information is just gone forever. So that's a good thing, because we have the tools and the ability and the smarts to figure out how to get that data back. There's many different things that you can do. So the things that we do as far as mitigating, as far as protecting, all the things that we have to constantly keep learning in our businesses, you're learning constantly. And so for a lot of people, if you've ever gotten a college degree or gone to, an extra school or anything like that, you'll understand that what you're doing in this business is you're constantly learning. And it's almost like you're getting an ongoing degree in what you do on a daily basis. So make sure you remember that and don't ever feel like, hey, if you don't know something or you can't figure something out, that's okay, because you'll figure out how to get it the next time. All right. With that, let's take a couple minute break here and we'll get into our main topic. Join us for the 2020 annual TechCon Unplugged, bringing the community together. Get away from your business for a weekend of learning, fun, and some new relationships in a getaway retreat. Join like-minded business owners to help your IT business thrive. Hear from experts and get one-on-one time with peers facing the same challenges you are. Walk away with concrete action items to take your business to the next level. It is September 25th through the 27th, 2020 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go get your tickets now over at TechConUnplugged.com. You can also get your hotel information and all that stuff there and go ahead and book your hotel rooms. We want to see everybody in this community there, or as many as possible. It's always great to get together and meet with other people in the flesh versus just seeing us online in our wonderful faces on this channel. Right, Paco?
Yep. I was on mute there.
Paco, you got anything to say about this conference since you're like the head of this thing?
I mean, I don't know if I'm the head of this thing, but I'm ahead of anyway. No, I think that again, the reason why we're doing this is because we are trying to bring all facets of computer businesses, IT businesses together. So whether you are a computer repair shop, a computer repair consultant, a hybrid, so you have a computer repair shop and you're doing IT services, or if you're a full-fledged MSP and just trying to figure out what you want to do, we try to bring pretty much everything we can all together. And that's kind of the reason why we do what we do in this show and what we're hoping to do in the next show, and be a little bit better, have more content, have more exposure to vendors and partners that hopefully can help you run your day-to-day business a little bit better, more efficient, and make a little bit more on your bottom line.
I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, excellent. All right, let's go ahead and go into our main topic. Today, we're going to talk about security best practices. And I know that we've talked about security many, many times. You hear security in the news all the time. But here's the thing. It's an ever-changing landscape. And it's something that you got to be aware of. And there's always improvements in things that you can do in your business to better yourself today. That's what we kind of look at. So, Paco, you kind of brought this whole thing, and I know we made a quick list of things we want to talk about, but just kind of give me an overview of what security in a business means to you.
So you can look at this in two different. Did I unmute myself? Yes, I did. We can go through this two different ways. And we had, again, a couple of guys that got together this weekend. You can take this on two different ways. One, on what you're implementing with your business, with your clients, and then the other side of what are you really doing yourself, and what are you implementing, and understanding how certain things are running, right? So for me, getting the best security practices down is ensuring that you don't get caught with your pants down. Essentially, there's a lot of times where a lot of simple things that we can be doing that could provide value to the customer tends to be overlooked. And sometimes we have the ability or the habit where we run off of we work off of our mind instead of having a checklist. And we oftentimes get into that same rigmarole as we go day by day, and we end up missing something. So the biggest piece of it is making sure that you document as much as you can. And we've preached about documentation before, but this time really having an active documentation that kind of rolls with it as you go along, as you're trying to audit or figure out and standardize security in this case, right? So how I view it is, in my head, security should always be viewed from top down. So basically, how do I protect my client from all the way before it even hits the network down to the domain? So you want to implement a lot of automated monitoring tools that's going to be helping you out. One tool that I've mentioned before, which is called Heatrix tools. It's similar to MX Toolbox, but essentially it will help you monitor quite a bit of domains, and they have a free account. They also have a paid account that monitors, I think, well over 200 domains. And that way it allows you to know if your client's domain has been blacklisted. And it will monitor every so often to ensure that. And for a while, I thought, it's working. You know, I haven't got flagged anything. And it just so happened that Saturday, when we got together, I got an alert that one of the domains got blacklisted, and one of the top, I think it was like 32 sites or 32 filter companies that they kind of check on like the top ones that report if an email or a domain is doing some bad stuff. And one got reported. So went in there, got it all sorted out, asked to remove, and then trying to figure out, okay, what's going on the domain that didn't get taken care of that caused it to be spam. And little do you know, you find out that the SPF record, the DKIM record, and DMARC records are not added. So that's going to have to be a time when Mike Wise comes on the show to explain what SPF, DKIM, and DMARC really mean. All I know, they're needed for the domain to help prove that the legitimacy of any emails or that domain is going to where it's coming from. So any other services you're using, like an RMM, that's emailing on your behalf, a newsletter or mailing software type thing like HubSpot, you want to make sure you put that information in your domain so it lets the outside world know that it is really you and not somebody assuming that it's you, or I guess pretending that it's like you as electronic communications go out.
Okay. And Mike, what about you? What's your take on the whole best security practices, things that you kind of an overview of what you think about it when people say, yeah, I need to have security in my network?
So when I had my MSP, I think towards the end of it, because I sold off my MSP company at the end of last year, December 31st, focused on Magnus Box full time. And I think the biggest thing was that it seems like you have to make sure you got layered security approach. You got the antivirus, you got employee training or your client's employee training, some kind of cybersecurity training awareness. But to me, also, you need to make sure that the MSP itself is locked down as well, because right now we're seeing a huge increase in MSPs being targeted by attackers, and a lot of it's due to lack of security on our own systems. So, you know, two-factor everything, make sure everything's encrypted, your notes aren't just sitting out there on some unsecured document. I mean, that's my take on is that we need to make sure that our platforms are secure first before we can properly sell those services and offer them to our clients. Otherwise, you're just doing a disservice to your clients and opening yourself up to a bunch of legality issues.
That's good. Yeah, that's a lot of good points right there. So let's take some time and let's go ahead and go through a list, because we're kind of touching on some of these subjects, and I'd like to dive down a little bit deeper and get some more information on maybe what we're doing or thoughts on what could be done. And so in our list, and Paco, you would probably agree with this from your statement earlier, is you said we got to stop things from getting into the network. And so the first way that you would do that is obviously with a firewall. Now, with firewalls nowadays, that's fine when you're on premise at a business. How many people actually work from home? And who's actually checking how their networks are set up? There is a lot of people that work from home. And I think that's another opportunity that we could have as far as going out there and saying, okay, I think a lot of times, even on a home network, I do it here in my own home. I use business class network devices to protect my home, protect my network right here. So I think you can do that in the home, and I don't think it's not as expensive as it used to be. And not only that, a lot of this stuff, when you're talking about compliance and everything like that, there's a lot of things you got to think of.
So I agree with you. I think, and it's funny because me and my friend Andy, who owns Greenfire PC and Signs, we actually just started a conversation of VPNs. And he's more of a residential computer repair with some small businesses. So he's starting to try and understand more about small business support and business class versus consumer and things like that. And exactly like you just said, implementing a firewall is probably a necessity with everything that's going on right now in the world. I mean, there's just so many attacks. You have to figure out what's going on your network, what's coming in, but you also have to figure out what's going out. You have to figure out what's going on both sides of the communications of your network and understanding if something is inside trying to phone home. And that's where a firewall really helps out. But you can't just, again, like backups, you can't just set it and forget it either. So, for us, we use Untango firewalls, and we actually buy the appliances versus purchasing our own. Now, the great thing about Untango is they actually have a university in training where they teach you on an overall basis of firewalls and VLANs and how to set it up and get into the apps and the reporting and things like that. But it also then goes into, as a technician, how do you modify this? How do you support it? And it has great 3 courses. And I think the first course takes about 10 hours for you to go through. So it's an extensive training, similar to like what Snap AV has for, networking 101, 102, and 101, 201, and 301. To kind of understand how to network on those devices and get better understanding of the devices themselves. So whatever device you decide to implement, whether it is a firewall or maybe you're using a proxy service like Zorus, ensure that you are setting it up properly and get the right training, because you can't just put it in and think that it's going to do its thing, because it may not. The second piece of it is for those that are working from home, it gives you now the ability to set up a VPN. Now, a lot of firewalls and business routers allow you to set up VPNs directly in the router, but you can have the choice whether you want to use a service similar to like Pulse Secure. You can use OpenVPN, which is one of the default ones for a lot of the business class routers, or you can develop your own on the server that's at your client's business place. But having that available to connect via VPN solves the issue of an unsecured network. That's really what you want to try and figure out, where if you put on the VPN, it should give you the tunnel that you need anyway to get to the business network and to begin with. It also helps not only for those that work from home, but work in the public as well. So they're using a public Wi-Fi, Starbucks, co-working space, things like that. That's really what we're trying to do now, as our focus is, we've worked out of a co-working space for almost close to 7 years now. Actually 7 years in February. So we've been working out of co-working spaces for the past 7 years, but a lot of co-working spaces don't know that you can actually put in networking equipment inside your own cube or inside your own office without having to purchase another ISP service. So a lot of people think that you have to buy an ISP. You then have to go ahead and, which is an additional bill, which for those that are at a co-working space, you're trying to lower that bill. And then you put in your networking equipment. But by you putting in your own networking equipment inside your own office or in your shared space, if you're in a dedicated area, you now have segmented your own network, and you can secure that, and you can ensure that your equipment is in good spot. So that's kind of what we're doing now with a lot of our co-working space neighbors, to let them know that they can do this and that it is something that can be done, which helps secure them and brings a little bit more business to us.
Mike, your thoughts?
So definitely, I mean, with having a firewall, you got to make sure that you can set it up properly in the first place. I see in the forums a lot that people are jumping from firewall to firewall, trying to get the best return on investment or try to get the best bang for their buck, but it all comes down to making sure that your client's secure. I know for myself, I have one employee for Magnus Box, and we just started leasing an office space, and we just VPN into the network, so where we can do most of our development and testing. And then we make sure that the firewall is locked down as well. But you got to make sure understand fully how to set those up before you can before you can properly sell them to your clients. And if you don't know, it goes back to find someone that can set up the firewall for you properly and verify it's set up, or just take some time to learn it. Go through forums. Groups like this one here is a great way to learn as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that have been using a brand of firewall for years.
Yep.
And they will use it consistently because it's what they're used to. And it might not be the cheapest thing. And it might not even be the best thing. But for their business and the way they run it, it's the best thing for them because they know it like the back of their hand. So when they have to go in and mitigate and protect their customers by setting up things in there, they can go in and do that. Or when you run into problems, they can take care of it. Mike, I'm going to go back to your last statement before where you had said that, people are trying to get the best bang for the buck. No, let's call it what it is. People are cheap.
Exactly.
And especially in this community, people are just, and I get it. You're trying to cut costs. You're trying to save here or there. Sometimes when you're paying for a quality product, it's actually better to pay a little bit more, especially if you're going to get quality service. Now, it's not going to be perfect. And I know a lot of people want to hit it out of the park, right, Paco? I want 100%, baby.
100%, baby. 100% or nothing.
That's right.
And like you said, from the lesson from last week, be frugal. Don't be cheap.
Yep.
Exactly.
There you go. All right. So the second one we're going to talk about is documenting your cybersecurity policies. Now, we're talking about documenting not only, I don't think this is just for ourselves to know what our policies are. That's important. And we need to have something set up. And I would probably say that most people probably don't have anything that's extensive of what they do on a regular basis. In other words, they might have a basic list of, hey, here's what I do. But I think a lot of times we'll create a document. I know I'm like this. I'll create a document and that document stays the same for years. And it's not until I actually go back in and look at that document and start making some changes to go, I don't do that anymore. But I do this. And so I need to add and remove and all that kind of stuff. Kind of like the tax code, except they don't remove anything. So anyways, with that being said, I think the other part of documenting your cybersecurity policy is making sure that your client knows exactly what you're doing. They may not understand it all, but I think it's a good policy to have something in place where they can go, oh, it's just like, hey, here's what you're getting with your oil change at the dealership. You're going to get this, this, and this. We're going to rotate your tires. We're going to check all your fluids. We're going to check your filters, blah, 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 blah. All these different things that they're doing. Most of us don't really even care. It's like, hey, it needs to be changed, change it, whatever. But at least they put a list together and well, hey, I'm not just paying, 30, 40, 50 bucks for nothing. So I think it's important to get those policies out there, not only for yourself, but also for your customers. Paco?
Yep, what you said. No, but I think, like you said, I mean, that's why a lot of locations and like the analogy you use, as far as for a lot of mechanic shops or maintenance shops, they have their 47-point inspection, their 37-point inspection, things like that. And it's one of those where, they're doing that one to cover their, CYA. And the other piece of it is it's a great opportunity to look for work. And that's how you bring in more upsells and things like that as well. I mean, that's really how you should develop something similar to that, where documenting your cybersecurity policy should be a checklist. They should have this, they should have that, etc. The other way you can look at it is what you're offering for your clients. So in this example, let's say, you want to provide a firewall to a client, but they're not willing to pay it upfront, or maybe you want to make it so that it's profitable for you. So instead of maybe charging them $300 for the firewall and then they pay for the fee moving forward, maybe you do something where you purchase it, but then you tell them, all right, this is your cybersecurity package. We're putting the firewall, we have your managed antivirus, backup, boom, 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 but it's all now a fee. And instead of them paying for the hardware, now you're paying the fee over X amount of time. And then maybe after like 9 months, now they've paid off that hardware. Now, the reason why this becomes very helpful is because if that firewall goes out of date, or if you need to replace it, or whatever the case may be, you can do an even swap. And because they're still paying you that fee. And after it's been paid off, it's all money in your pocket. But at the same time, you can now do a lot of these things that are seamless, that are not painful for the customer. And you're trying to be as convenient as you can for that. So being able to document all those for what you should do for a client can easily be what you offer for a client as well. So if something misaligns, you want to make sure you get it so that you do hit all those 47-point checklists or those 37-point checklists, things like that, and can help you monitor things in your RMM a lot easier to help bring in more of that work to your business.
All right, Mike.
So on cybersecurity policies, you got to make sure that you keep those updated. Like I threw in the chat, and this is a horrible term from I'm also a IT manager for a credit union. They got to be living documents. You got to keep them updated. You can't just write them once and then never touch them again. You got to make sure you keep those policies updated. And I mean, it could be policies, procedures on how to take care of a client specifically, how to check for fire or firmware and whatnot. You just got to make sure that you're taking care of those things and making sure that your equipment's and your client's equipment's up to date as well. And make sure you follow those policies and procedures. I know when I had my business, I didn't have any policies and procedures for my MSP. So, I should be the last one to talk. But I have policies and procedures now that we have a backup company that has over 200 terabytes of data on it. So we have policies and procedures that we have to follow, as well as cybersecurity policies and HIPAA policies and everything. Got a big book full of policies now.
Gotta love regulation.
Gotta love HIPAA regulation.
All right, let's go down to our next topic, and that is planning for mobile devices. Obviously, this is a bring your own device to work universe that we live in now, and you're not going to pretty much stop that. I think a lot of times you can, if somebody's using a phone, even if they're using it for work, maybe it doesn't connect to the network on the regular server side, or maybe it just connects to a guest network, or there's many different ways that you can come up with a policy in order to mitigate anything that touches a secure network that has policies in place that cannot be compromised because of HIPAA, et cetera.
They can't do it. They can't do it. They can't bring their devices. No, it goes back.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. Trust me. I tried to tell them. So
this is the fight.
it is a constant fight because you have so you have different scenarios in this case, right? And it's the BYOD, bring your own device dilemma. You have those that are concerned about security, but are worried about their privacy of their personal device. And they don't want you to install things on their systems, or when you have to apply things, you have to make, different arrangements for them because that's what they want. And it's the constant fight of, no, it's in the business, it's connecting to the business network. It needs to be secured like a business piece of equipment. You're screwed. That's just what it is. But sometimes it's very difficult to keep with the follow-up of that constantly. The policy is set. You're missing the policy dateline. Updates are supposed to apply on Sunday nights. You keep shutting off the PC. Hey, you've been closing the lid on the laptop. You're not powering it off. It hasn't rebooted in 2 weeks. I'm forcing this reboot. Things like that. And that's a big expander. Like, it's not 2 weeks till you let something reboot. You should have an automatic policy that does it every 7 days, at least for me. So I get a lot of calls saying it just rebooted out of nowhere. And my reply to them is, did you reboot it after every night like I asked you to? No? There you go. So there's that issue. The other issue is you have to make sure you have the technology and the support to be able to handle bring your own devices. So again, having a VPN in place, being able to monitor devices, and especially for mobile phones and things of that nature, where you have to lock them down so that they can't take proprietary information from the company when they leave. Same thing as maybe they have information that you need to gain access to, but they had their iCloud, their personal iCloud signed in on one of the applications that, you know, you were using, or that they stored all their data. That's a bigger issue that you have to try and sort out, because it was set up before you got and took over the network. And as you were going through all this process, you find out that the assistant who just left, who's been there for 10 years, had all the passwords assigned to her profile. And now, because of the way that they split, she wants nothing to do with the company. Now we're spending hours trying to reset passwords because they didn't have a policy in place to make sure that all these items were put in, were taken care of in a process before the network was taken over. So it's things like that where this whole bring your own device is a pain in the butt. And it's very hard to try and do that separation and still allow them to keep their own privacy per se for their personal devices.
Mike, what say you?
So from the MSP side of things, none of our clients would, it's one of those things where you want to enforce mobile bring your own device policies, but it all comes down to the owner of the company and getting that expectation set. And if they're not willing to enforce that, then it makes it harder for us as techs to make sure that their networks are secure. So, I mean, there's got to be ways to mitigate that, whether it's having them sign something saying, hey, we put this plan in place, you're not following it. From the vendor side is having an employee and we have PHI or personal healthcare information. We have very strict bring your own device policies. Only specific devices are allowed to touch our servers, and it has to be documented in our HIPAA guidelines. And it's stuff that we have to be very conscientious of here as a vendor for backup data. So, but with my MSP, it was just hard to get. I don't think I had anyone that enforced any bring your own device policy. It was pretty much a free-for-all on the Wi-Fi. So we just had to make sure servers were locked down. We had guest Wi-Fi set up that wasn't touching the internal network. And it's the best we can do. I mean, we can't force the business owners to change things unless they want to. And until they have a compromise that affects them, kind of like not having a backup, they're not going to make a change. At least that's my understanding from it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that want to have this where they can do whatever they want. And I think if you can't get to that point where you can where they can understand, or you can help them to understand that they can't bring these devices in, or it's not as good practice, or it's not a safe practice to bring these devices in, then like you said, Mike, you got to separate them on the network. You got to do some different things. And again, a lot of things we're talking about, and I know we're talking about the business side, but this should be also your home policies too. This is common sense stuff that you should be doing on a regular basis. We're not talking about anything it's only for one type of person. Somebody was asking me the other day, since I've been running computers in my own house, on my own network, and I've done things over time. I think the last actual virus that I got was in 2002. That was from Windows Instant Messenger, Microsoft Instant Messenger. And exactly. And somebody had sent me, now they didn't send it, say, check out my new car. And it was a link, and I clicked on it, and it pretty much almost wiped my whole computer out. Now, I'd had, certain backups and things like that, and I was really good at redoing my system, so not a big deal. I wasn't able to mitigate that at the time, but I was able to get everything back up and running. But it really sucks. And so when you look at those things, you're kind of like, I want to keep myself as safe as possible. So you do certain things, and it's common sense things, and that's why we really don't have problems. And I've had 5 kids go through this house, and they go to all kinds of different gaming sites and stuff like that. And still, there might be some unwanted software, but there's never been anything malicious that shut anything down here. So with that being said, there are things that you can do that are just common sense practices that will make your life a whole lot easier when you're thinking about this stuff.
Was it a nice car?
I don't even remember. Might have been a Fiero. Who knows? For those. I just dated myself. Okay, so with that, let's take a quick break and we'll get back into the rest of these topics. And if you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged. And what that will do is that will get you into our secret Facebook group, or I guess it's a private Facebook group now. They changed the heading, but it's the same thing. And you can get in that group and check out what's going on and ask a question and be in a safe environment where people will treat you nicely. Now, everybody does have opinions on things, and that's fine, as long as we don't go, well, that's stupid. What are you doing that for? Then, stating your opinion is one thing, but making somebody feel stupid, we do not go for that. So anyways, it's $1 a show, and we do four shows a month. And so you're looking at $4, cup of coffee, and it helps grow the show and do some things that we want to do in the future. I want to thank all of our current Patreon supporters for your continued support. All right, so let's continue on. The next thing is, and this is going to be a controversial one, and I would say that it's probably something that none of us do on a regular basis, and that would be educating the employees. And I don't mean your employees. I mean the company that you're supporting, their employees. And I remember John Dubinsky and myself had talked about this a while back, of having a sheet with some rules on it that you could put around the office. And it would say things like, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do not do this. And so you kind of had these hard and fast rules, but we kind of talked about it and we said, even though we're giving people the information to help themselves stay secure from a common sense standpoint, how many people are actually going to read those? How many people are going to actually, even if they read them, how many people are going to follow them? When you say, turn this switch off here if your network's down, and to reboot it and then turn it back on. You wait 30 seconds, turn it back on. People go, what switch? You could have an arrow pointing directly to the switch and it doesn't matter. People go, where? I don't see it. I don't know why that is. It's called IT blindness. I don't know. People just don't see what they don't want to see, I guess. So anyways, when we're talking about educating our employees, and I know different people have done it differently, where they'll have get-togethers once a month, quarterly, annually, whatever, where they can talk about certain things that are going on. Don't click on links in email, blah, blah, blah. All these different things that we know, but people still do. I had my son who asked a question, well, how do people get ransomware viruses? Well, usually they click on something. I know a lot of people say, oh, there's drive-bys and this and that and the other, but let's be perfectly honest. And I still think this is true today. Most of your compromises, I would say, is probably predominantly from email still. So with that being said, there's one area that you have to mitigate, because everybody still, like it or not, still uses email to communicate, especially in businesses.
I really don't have anything to say to this, because it's still an ever so going. It's one of those where, depending on the type of issue or what they're reporting, depends on what the fee is going to be. They're an all in, and it's something that had been explained, or they caused more work for me in the long run. Like, perfect example, I've told all my clients, when you have a new machine that comes in, don't touch it. Let me prep it. We'll go from there. Somehow they continue to keep opening it up, turning it on, and signing in with a Microsoft account from the office. So now I have to go through this whole process of removing the Microsoft account, readjoining it to a Jump Cloud user, and it causes me an extra 30 minutes to go through all this and then run the updates and let the sign in happen again, so they get a bill. And then they ask, why is there a bill? Because they're all in. I let them know, you went against a policy that we had in place. This is what it is. Another thing that was talked about this weekend that was actually really cool, and I think a good idea, is for those clients that you have those quick 5-10 minute calls, and you don't feel comfortable, you kind of just let it go as it is. What you can do is you still should create a ticket for that conversation, issue, or whatever was reported. You generate an invoice, but you zero it out and you send it to the client, because then that way that'll allow you to, they know how much work you've done for them, and it helps you on a reporting aspect. Because now if you have a lot of these 5-10 minute phone calls through an X amount of time frame, you can then now explain, okay, look, we've got quite a few of these, if we continue to keep moving forward, it's going to be this type of charge, and that way it can help respect your support, so it's not the true quote unquote unlimited support that's being abused.
Mike?
Yeah, so short story. I'll make it quick. I did a lot of governmental offices when I had my MSP, and we had one that was all you can eat. It worked out well because they never called, but they needed new computers. Theirs were running slow, and they had two computers. One was the server that was a lady's desktop, and they decided to take it upon themselves and go to Staples and buy the 250 special or the 300 special, and then paid the Staples technician to transfer all their data over. And it created a nightmare for everything, because there was proprietary billing software on there and the whole 9 yards. And we billed them for it. I mean, we charged them full price for a service call, and they complained why after they got the bill. And I'm like, listen, you didn't call us to replace the computer, which is in your contract with us, and you guys caused more work. We had to send a technician out. It's full price, and they didn't like it, but they understood. And then they kept calling after that, wanting to know why their computer was so slow. And I just kept saying, well, you bought it from Staples. What do you expect, But educating employees, I mean, it all comes down to convenience versus security. And convenience is always going to break security no matter what. We have a policy in place where no one's allowed to have a flash drive, not for Magnus Box, but for my employer. And someone will always try to bring a flash drive. And luckily we have those ports locked down. But that's the huge battle, is at what point, what's the fine medium for that? I mean, I know for our partners, for Magnus Box, we're always preaching security in every video. 2-factor everything. Make sure you don't use your credentials on a public computer or private computer. Just we want to make sure everything's secure, secure for everyone. So that's my short story.
That's good. Yeah, it reminds me of another story. A lot of people know the company I work for, Ford Motor Company, and we actually had an electrician, and this was way back in the day. It was probably back in the 90s. Had a floppy drive on his computer, and he was installing a game or something from that floppy disk onto that floppy drive in the computer, and basically shut a whole plant down because there was some sort of virus that came in and messed up the servers, and it did some wild stuff. So that's a true story. And the individual actually ended up getting fired, and he did get his job back, but it was pretty bad. And it's something anybody could have done, right? I've seen where they'll have people and they'll actually place USB thumb drives in a parking lot going into a government building. And you would not believe how many people actually pick those up, take them inside. Who knows what they're doing? Maybe they're trying to check and see whose it is. They can get it back to them, but they're plugging it into these computers that they know they're not supposed to. And it's constant. All right. So going along those same lines, talk about enforcing safe password practices. Paco, when we're talking about safe password practices, what is your rule of thumb for the people that you take care of?
So you grab your nearest post-it notes, you go ahead and type in the username and password, and then you stick it onto the bottom of your monitor so that it looks like a sunflower around your monitor. No. There's quite a few ways that you can tackle this. The biggest piece is to get a password manager. I mean, I think that's the simplest and easiest way to really secure a lot of the safe passwords from being seen or being in a notebook or being in some type of document. It is a training exercise for a lot of clients that don't know how to use it. But there are those that are familiar with the autofill from Chrome, Firefox, Edge. So it's essentially the same thing. You just click the button and it does its thing, just a little bit more secure. The second part, obviously, is making sure that password, you have a safe password practice or checklist or whatnot. So homework for everyone is to go into all of your clients' networks and make sure that the default passwords are all been changed for the printers and scanners and some of the other devices. Because sometimes we may get so busy when doing an implementation, we may have left an access point with a default password. Or maybe we left the router and we told ourselves we'll get to it. Life happens, more business happens, and we forget. So that's something for those that are running on, I believe, the Ubiquity Cloud, Snap AV, OpenMesh, aka Datto Networking. You should be able to go in to log into these devices with either Overseer for like Snap AV, or if you use a company like Domots that can connect to the systems. Take a look, see if you can get all those defaults reset and changed and documented. That's going to be a good spot to start. And then also making sure you do MFA everything that you have known demand, because they are coming for us. So, and by them being the lovable script kiddies, as one of the members of the community tends to say, they are looking for exploits, and the easiest is to just walk right in the front door. So for those that are not, please MFA everything you can and use whatever app that you would like to use. We use Bitwarden. Authy is great. I've heard a lot of great input about with Duo. There's quite a bit of multi-factor authentication applications you can use. If you don't like to use the phone apps, you can always use the desktop versions. If you feel that you are not safe or secure with the desktop versions, get a YubiKey. I think Ron Cervantes had mentioned that at the last TechCon Unplugged, how that has really saved him with simplicity. And his suggestion is not to just have one, but have two YubiKeys in case you lose one. Those are a great opportunity to have a more simplified multi-factor authentication. But I will say, with MFA, Microsoft is a pain in the bleep, because I can't turn that thing just on. As everyone knows, I switched from G Suite to Office 365 for my internal infrastructure. And it is a pain to try and turn it on, and it doesn't work. I have to go back and forth to keep going and enabling and not enabling. And apparently this is proper way of rows of steps to do it. In G Suite, it's turn it on, hit the code, and you're in, and that's it. So that's my only thing is if you start on the MFA road, make sure that you test it yourself, because you're going to have a lot of calls that are going to be a pain that you may have caused.
Now, Paco, on that Microsoft one, are you using the app to approve those, or are you still using a code through your third-party authenticator?
I am using the Microsoft Authenticator because I could not figure out how to use another third-party authenticator to use it. But that is on the list. But I'm using the Microsoft Authenticator for the Office 365 stuff.
Because I think I use for my Microsoft products, I will use the Microsoft Authenticator. It just, every time I log in, I basically have my phone. It says approve or deny. I hit the button and boom, I'm in.
Oh,
Now,
I have the time-based code now. I haven't turned on the approve yet. So that's something I would like to do. But so it's interesting you say that. So approve and deny is kind of the push. I think the term is FIDO, but I could be wrong. FIDO. But Mike Wise over at I can't think of his name, Clockwork Solutions, who was a friend of the network, of the show, and he made a good point on if we use the push capability for all our clients, they may just be I can't think of the phrase, but they may just be programmed when they see it pop up to just blindly click approve, not thinking that it was them logging in and whatnot, because it's so easy now. Is it just one of those where is that going to be a problem now, where they're just clicking approve blindly because they feel like, it comes up, and in their head they're brainwashed, or they're not brainwashed, but they're programmed to do that to gain access to the login. And if they do it so often, it's just second nature to hit it. And if it isn't them, They just let a bad guy in. So that was something to think about, that, and I didn't think about it that way till we brought it up. So something to think about for those that are looking to do the push versus the time codes as well.
Yeah, it's the problem is it's would you say convenience versus security, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of times people will, though, even with the codes and stuff like that, if they can find a way, i.e., remember this on this browser for 30 days, whatever it might be. And a lot of times, I don't know that we can always shut those things off on the browsers. Yeah, people are going to kind of do what they want to do. I guess I never really thought about that, but it is a good point, because when it comes up, obviously it came up on my phone, which is on me, and I'm logging in at that point. So it's not all the time, but it is periodically. So yeah, that is definitely something to be aware of. Good point. Mike, what were you going to say?
So to go along with that, Paco, you're right. I mean, I know a place that they had the Microsoft Office set up where it would give them a phone call to the office phone, and they were basically brainwashed or programmed, as you said, to, as soon as it calls and they hear that robotic voice talking on the phone, just to jam whatever button it was to override it immediately, because they knew someone was logging in, but they had no idea who was logging in, and they just, anyone in the office that heard it would just push that button. And I'm like, wow, that's a policy for an institution. That's insane. So I know for us, we love Google and G Suite just because of the calendar for doing demos and whatnot. But you know, once I've got an employee, I couldn't use what's that offline one, KeyPass. I couldn't use KeyPass anymore because I had to make sure my employee could have access to it. So we went to 1Password, mainly because it does all the two-factor scanning. It's got the secure authentication, multi-factor authentication stuff. And I can also audit anytime an employee logs into a server. It'll give me a report and let me know when someone's logged in using those credentials. I agree, brainwash is a great word in the chat. But, you know, I've played with a lot of RMM systems when I was an MSP. And towards the end, before I decided to move and switch over to being a vendor, I got to say the best one that I've seen for multi-factor authentication is Pulseway. Just the way that they have it set up where it goes to your phone. It'll tell you the location that someone tried to access the account from with a map, and then you have to approve and deny and then authenticate on top of it. They should be the example of how to set up proper multi-factor authentication. And I'm not just saying that because I use them myself. But I mean, all of them are forcing it, which is great that our tools are doing that. So you just got to make sure, and sometimes it's hard to get your clients to use those things. Like I said, or like we've been talking about, security over convenience. I mean, people want to be able to get into their stuff, don't want to have to deal with it until that repercussion hits and their stuff gets compromised. And then they come back to us, blaming us for, why didn't you secure this? So I'll get off my stool now, or off my podium.
Well, actually, Mike, I'm going to throw it back to you, because here's a softball for the next subject, and that is, you're the expert here when it comes to backing up data. So we're going to talk about why
is that what we
should
do?
Regularly back up all of our data.
Yeah. So, so I mean, there's many backup platforms out there, and you have to evaluate what data needs to be backed up on your client's network, and you have to do some kind of an assessment for that. We had a client for a year, a company that does like sprinkler systems for industrial buildings in our MSP, and we didn't know that one of the office computers had an external hard drive that had all their critical data on it, because they never told us until our RMM software told us that, hey, this drive D here, or E over here, this thing's got like 5% left on it. And then when I called them, they're like, hey, that is all of our business data. And I'm like, are you backing that up? And they go, no, it's safe on an external hard drive. And I'm like, okay, we need to talk. And you know, funny side story on that is that's why I created Magnus Box, because one of our clients lost their hard drive, burnt up, and they lost all of their CAD designs for their business that they needed, and it was going to cost $2 to $3 grand to get it back, and they shut down because of that. And that's what really turned me to the backup world, is that I felt that other things weren't working that I was using. So, but yeah, you should always be backing up servers, workstations, and whenever I had a client that had a server, we forced them to make sure they had a backup. They were required to have some kind of backup software, whether it was the Magnus Box or Carbonite, Backblaze, Cloudberry. We forced them to have that, and they were also required to have an external hard drive on site. So we had that best practice 3 copies: your original file on the system, the backup file on the local hard drive, and then a copy on the cloud. And we forced them. That wasn't an option. Otherwise, we would have dropped them as a client. And we only had a handful of servers. No one ever said, no, we're not going to do it, because you have to set that expectation. And the easiest way, the easiest way to sell a backup to a client is after they lose all their data. It's the easiest, number one surefire way to sell backup to your clients is after they take that loss, and they'll always come back then.
I've always wondered and we've all had this where clients will ask us, well, why should I back up my data? And basically, my response has always been, if you're running a business, or let's say you just have a computer in the home, but if you're running a business, you're going to say, basically, what would happen if you lost all of your documents for your business tomorrow? What would happen? What would happen to your business? And the answer usually, or the response usually is, well, I'd go out of business. And you're like, that's why you should need to back up.
So really quick story, because I know we're coming up on the hour, but what's funny is that similar situation happened with a client who was giving me a hard time on, purchasing a PC because they were on Windows 7. The PC was so old. And I basically told them, you need to replace it or the contract's over. And it was this whole big hubbub that happened. President had to get involved. Basically, everything got sorted out. But as I was doing the migration for this PC, because a new second in command came in, how this happened, I have no idea. But they moved, so this external hard drive that they had plugged in that was doing the local backup, which we have set up with conveniently Magnus Box, it was from the hard drive to the cloud from the QuickBooks settings. Somehow, from their rabid minds, they put the QuickBooks file, the QBW file, on the external hard drive as well. So not only was the desktop being backed up and the QuickBooks backup files were being backed up in the folder, but the funny part is if the hard drive would have died and we didn't have the cloud backup and they would have just canceled the services, they would have probably been running for weeks like that. And had that hard drive died, they would have lost everything with the QBW file. So of course I moved it back, let them know, oh my God, how did that happen? This is on you, not me, but we're on a good spot. And, it just tells you how important it is to stand your ground on your list of security practices, because if you deviate just a little bit, you may end up taking that blame, and it's going to cause an issue for you, for your business, whether it be, it could be legal, it could be monetary, etc. So that's why you need to make sure you're stern about what you're doing to support your clients.
Very good. Yeah, I think backup is one of those things that it's almost like, and I guess really the best way to put it, it's like having insurance on your car, on your house, things that you value. And for some reason, I don't know why it is, but I shouldn't say we, a lot of people out there think they don't value their digital data because they just feel like it's always going to be there and it's never going to disappear. And it's hard to explain to somebody that electronics, no matter how good or how long they've been around, SSDs, they still fail. Electronics will always fail. That's a given. It's not if, it's when. And so trying to explain that to somebody, you're like going, yeah, are you still using the same clock radio you've had for the last, 50 years? People right now are going, clock radio, what's that?
Yeah. There was a clock on a radio before?
Exactly. I still have one. I don't use it, mind you, other than it shows the time in my bedroom. But other than that, yeah.
Blinking, isn't it? 12.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, it has backup battery on this one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, anyways. So I think, Mike, is there anything else? Obviously, we know backup is important. Obviously, we know that's kind of your area of expertise that you like to mess around in. But is there anything else that we can cover as far as backup right now?
No, I mean, just like Paco said, and you said, how long can they live without their business? I mean, if they lost that QuickBooks file and they couldn't run payroll the next day, are their employees going to say, oh, well, it's okay, I'm good, we'll just pay me when you get around to it? They're not going to wait.
Right.
They gotta be realistic about this, that their data is more important than they're thinking, and they don't like I said, they won't realize it until they lose it. So it's our job to go in and remind them of that.
All right. Well, I think, Paco, any lasting thoughts on what we've talked about today? Anything that we haven't touched on that, there's always more things that we could touch on, but is there anything that we've covered thus far that we maybe have missed something?
I'm sure we have, and I think this is an opportunity for the audience to kind of email in on your suggestions on some stuff that we have missed or just couldn't cover in the hour. There's always obviously like the real simple things that we all know to do. Install an anti-malware software on your system. Make sure you have patching done properly on a proper cycle, or develop a policy so that you know how to make sure your systems are patched. But outside of those, we would love to hear what you guys are doing specifically for your clients. And if you have questions on, I really don't know if I'm doing enough for this, and maybe we can try and figure out a session for the upcoming conference or retreat, I like to call it, to speak more about this and help others depending on where they are in their business.
And with that, if you want to email your questions and comments, you can do that to jeff@mspunplugged.com, and we will get those in the show. All right. With that being said, Mike, thank you for coming out today. If people want to get a hold of you and find out more about your awesome backup product, where would they go?
I'm everywhere. So you guys can, I'm going to be attending TechCon 2020. I'm going to be there. I think Paco said I was the first sign up for vendors. I read online Jeff was buying drinks for the first vendor and first MSP owner to sign up. So
absolutely.
So I'll be there. I'll be at TechCon later on this year. You can reach me by going to magnusbox.com. You can email support@magnusbox.com. We also have our own private partner community, and I also do a live show every Friday in our partner group just to update people with what our platform's doing, what we did the last week, where we're going. I'm huge on our partner community, so we're partner built, and that's how it's been from day one. Paco's the one that got me started in this venture, so I blame him for it. He planted the seed in my head, and that's what started it. And I always appreciate him and what you guys have done for our community.
Thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for sharing that. Paco, where can people find you?
You can find me here on this great broadcasting program every Sunday evening at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, and you'll find us right here on MSP Unplugged.
Awesome. Great to have you again as my great partner in crime. All right. Come join us every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch live and hang out in the chat room over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. I want to thank you for subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.